What is up, Bayside Youth? I'm here with an incredible group of people to have a conversation, but before we get into it, I'm gonna drink my Starbucks, and everyone, it says Ty.
That's me.
Everyone's gonna introduce themselves, so let's start over here.
My name is Shy. I'm a high school student and I'm from the Lakewood Ranch campus.
My name is Cassidy. I am a high school student from the Fruitville campus.
I'm Dale. I'm a local psychotherapist, and I'm not a high school student.
Hey.
Guys, I'm Ty. I'm the youth director at the Fruitville campus. What?
Welcome, guys. I'm really excited that we are here to have this conversation today because, as you know, we live in a crazy world full of chaos, darkness, anxieties, things that can cause us a lot of mental health issues and things from anxiety and stress to depression and various disorders. It's crazy out there, but we believe that in the midst of it, that there's this guy named Jesus who allows us to have a peace that's supernatural beyond any of that. So I wanted to kind of just hear if any of you guys have experienced or dealt with anything like that, and some of the things you've done, some of the things that have helped. What are some things maybe you've learned in the process? Because it is a process. So
I've struggled with anxiety and depression most of my life. And I think the biggest thing that has helped me cope with it is just relying on God through it all, because with anxiety, I feel like the need to have control of absolutely everything. And it's hard to put your faith in someone who seems so far away.
Now that is the truth, but when you're in the middle of it, just trust God.
Yeah.
It is tough, because I heard that and I trust God, but it's sometimes it's how?
Well, can you share maybe a time when you felt disconnected and how you got over the hump to reconnect with God?
Last year, I really was in the midst of it all. I didn't have help from a therapist or anything like that. It was basically me struggling alone, and I would sleep through the days, and I just didn't want to get up anymore. And then I got to this point where I couldn't do it anymore. I was so desperate. And so what I did in the moment was I just came to God about it. I just sat there and I was like, God, I'm struggling with this and I'm struggling with that, and I need help because I can't do this alone anymore. And then I also have panic attacks. And so just grounding yourself in the situation. I do this thing where I see what my five senses are.
The grounding activity, yes.
3 things that I can feel, 3 things that I can see, 3 things that I can hear, and just go through all the senses, and it calms you down because it gets you focused on something else rather than what you're anxious about.
That's good.
That's what I hear from meditating is good, because you're literally focusing on your next breath.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is when we get trapped in our heads, when the enemy is most in control, is when we're in that passive state. So as we move into action, if that's reaching out to get some help from someone, or pulling out in a grounding activity, or putting on some worship music and releasing it in worship, the active state helps to elevate it and get you more connected and away from that space where the enemy's got that whisper going, and you're no good and you're worthless and you're broken beyond repair.
Yeah, because I feel anytime I feel anxious, it's because I feel out of control, right? Whether that's with parenting or my marriage or ministry, it's when things don't go the way that I expect, I try to just hold on even more and even tighter, and that's when the anxiety creeps up, right?
Yeah.
But I have a question for you, Dale.
Sure.
Before we even get further, what is mental health?
Yeah.
Right? Can you
what a
define
great
mental
question.
health?
That's the first question on my list too.
So, in our culture, mental health is a common term, and we can break it down a bunch of ways, but an emotional distressing experience could be the generic response to that question. Are you in distress? Are you feeling an emotion that's uncomfortable, creating distraction, confusion, pulling you away from your ability to be in purpose? And that's the deeper piece I want to get to long term, is why is this here? Why does the enemy use it so much against us? Because he wants to block us from purpose and our full connection to Holy Spirit in our grounding of that and what that is. And God's put us here. He's ordained us to be in that purpose. The enemy's going to continue to pull us back. Another way to look at it is, of course, we have diagnoses and we can over-label. Of course, we have access to all the information of all time on our phone. Sometimes we over-describe it, but there's simple things. What am I feeling today? Is that a good feeling or a bad thing? Is that something that I can identify with? Am I even labeling it correctly and what it is? A classic scenario when I'm working with people is, I'm so angry, I don't know what's going on, I'm frustrated. But the real truth is the enemy's attacking them in embarrassment, shame, confusion, all these much softer places where the enemy really blocks us.
And even from my own experience last year, like experiencing anxiety and depression very heavily, actually worse than when I actually wasn't a Christian.
Yeah.
I actually would like wake up and, like you said, just like I just could not move, could not get out of bed, had no motivation. And when I did, I just felt like an anxious mess.
Yeah.
And what the feelings that I had were also so much worse because it's like, oh wow, like I'm such a horrible Christian. Like I have God and I can't even go out like and ask him what's wrong. Like and it was just like this shame that the enemy was just whispering like, oh look at you, like how are you going to be influenced to other people with like Christ and his love when you can't even reach out to God's love yourself?
I think that is such an important thing to know, because that's something that I mentioned is like I started to deal with anxiety as I like work at a church. Like it's like, so I think it's an important thing for everyone to understand.
Well, it's a
that,
double
like,
attack by the enemy.
Yeah.
You have the emotional experiences creating havoc, and then you also have the guilt about not being able to release it to God. This is a real normalized experience that all of us deal with.
Yeah.
You know, we always think I'm the only one that's experiencing this, and the truth is everybody has a layer here or there. If we think about just the last 2 years, COVID, all the different things that are happening politically in our world, the geopolitical dynamic with Russia attacking Ukraine, all this noise.
Crazy.
If I have a vulnerability, guess what? It's going to show up. But guess the other piece about being a teenager, being in high school, is you have so many other things going where you're still growing in yourself.
Yeah.
And if you are already vulnerable, then you're super vulnerable to that. We add the phone and the access to all these entertaining devices that teach us we can be entertained any second we want to, and we're not at peace. And that battle is constant.
Wow.
So do you believe everybody can be healed from anxiety? Like, as from my point of view, like I think that God does heal us, and he does. And sometimes he uses our anxiety for a bigger purpose. He uses our suffering for a bigger purpose. Like Romans 8:18, the pain you've been feeling cannot compare to the joy that is coming. And like, I know where I've been, and I know where I was 2 years ago, how like I didn't even want to be here anymore, like I was so done. But God used that, and he's using me to help other people with anxiety and other people with depression. So do you believe everybody like can
Well, I'll
be
change the word from healing to thriving through it.
Ooh, that's
wow.
good.
There is
Oh my
purpose in it.
gosh.
Wow.
There's
Wow.
absolute purpose in
Write
it.
that down.
Yeah.
We always our culture has us focused on the brokenness versus the celebration of the joy of the experience.
So good.
And how God can use that. And we can, as you can imagine, every day in front of me, I get the front row seat to all these amazing stories of testimony. When somebody initially comes in broken, I know truth. So I'm speaking that into them quickly in the reality of how we can celebrate now what that pain is, because he's going to use it.
Yeah.
You have to just really embrace that. And it's a real big paradigm shift for us, because we're so into the feeling and what's happening in my experience. But he's going to show you something special. So the prayer on that one is, God, give me a God wink here. Give me some confirmation. Give me a piece of this so I can see why this purposefulness is. And I'm going to be honest, that's really mature for a teenager to be thinking about. This is a hard concept for most adults to get, because we're just so into our flesh as a natural being in who we are. But if you get into that space and you think, okay, a trauma happened or some surprise happened, one of your first thoughts, if you go quickly to, okay, God, what am I supposed to learn through this? How are you going to use this through me? And what's this testimony going to transition to or translate to? It's mind blowing.
Yeah.
I love that.
And I feel like even from my experience of like you saying how it's to be like a living testimony, I am not like happy the fact that I did go through it, but I'm happy at the result of it. Because like
That's
I
a
had
difference for
and
sure.
struggled with like the anxiety and the depression, but now I can like look back and be like, no, like that was just the enemy's lie saying that I was like ashamed, and I should have been ashamed and guilty for not being able to reach out to God. But now it's like the people that are around me, I'm like, no, like I can just remind them of like the truth that God has like said. Like, no, like again, Romans 8:12. It was like, do not be conformed to things in this world, be transformed by the renewing of your mind.
Yeah.
And having that as like just little truths that we can hold on to, whether it's Romans 8:12 or Romans 8:18, we can just continue to fill people up with that truth and just encourage them through it instead of trying to just shut it out completely.
And one of the
That's so
things that
good.
I think is so important to get to this point is trusting God's plan and not our own, because it's
Yeah.
important to remember that God does promise us healing, both physically, mentally, in every form, but it isn't always immediate. Like sometimes He'll give us healing either now, later, or eventual healing as we spend eternity with Him,
Yeah.
which can be frustrating in the moment when.
Yeah.
If you love me, God, why don't you just give me the healing now? And it's just that's something we might never understand while we're on this.
So another point to interject, if you are struggling, don't do it alone.
Yeah.
You know, don't be a martyr in it and stick in it and say, okay, God's going to use this pain. Come on, hurt me more. No.
Yeah.
Reach out tell your
No.
family, tell a trusted loved one, tell your youth pastor, tell somebody, a volunteer. Get the word out. If you need professional help, this is where the line of mental health to mental illness really gets to, is then get the professional help that you need. We are, in our area, we have a phenomenal array of mental health options to get people support. But it doesn't always have to be in a vacuum. When I work with somebody, I'm sending them to accountability groups, I'm sending them to counseling with other people that are specialized maybe in a special area that they're struggling with besides myself. I'm getting them to church and in worship. It's a collective system that helps you heal and thrive through it.
So say I'm a student and, I feel that anxiety attack, those anxious thoughts coming on, whether I'm at school or home or whatever. Like, is there anything what should I do in that moment?
So I'm thinking a couple things. Is it an episode that's isolated, or is it a chronic condition? So if it's an episode that's just isolated, talking to a friend or something simple, one-step action to pull yourself out of what that is. Maybe journaling a little bit, creating some, if you're artistic, having an artistic outlet, finding ways to know that you're okay and at peace. Being prayerful in it, in the immediate sense of it, and then, as we said earlier, thinking about maybe how God could use it. Now, if it's a chronic condition, that's a whole different deal. That means, hey, after school, I need to talk to mom or dad and get some help. I need to really think about what's going on. Find a trusted ally where you can share those type of things with. And be at peace knowing that depending on where it is in terms of volume or level, that there is an answer to the confusion. Don't get attacked by the shame like we talked about. You're not alone. If we have 70 to 80% of all high school students are struggling with some mental illness, emotional thing that's happening. And the truth is it's probably more like 100% based on the realities of what's happened the last couple of years.
I believe it.
So they're not alone. But we also know social dynamics in high school are difficult. There's certain groups that are hard to kind of connect with, but find someone there. If you're feeling isolated, then make sure you're bringing that to the small group after breakout at church when you're having youth group and when you're getting into those opportunities. Be honest and real. You want to be liberated, really. There's nothing more liberating than telling your truth to a trusted, caring person.
Yeah.
And if they're a believer and there's somebody in faith, they're going to give you truth. And pray for that. Pray for those who surround you that provide that support.
Now, how do I know if I need to seek professional help? And talk.
As a high schooler, that's a tricky one.
Okay.
You know if you're broken, because you're not getting up for school for a couple weeks.
Yeah.
You know you're broken. That's like, hey, mom, dad, something's wrong, and let's get help. Now, it's a little tricky if mom and dad maybe aren't believers, aren't connected, and they're isolated in that. And you got to find ways to get help. But if there's chronic conditions that are affecting you medically, concentration, other variables of life, are you having excessive crying spells, confusion, other things that don't have a real good reason for them, anger, agitation is pretty typical for the guys. If something's coming out in ways that you used to maybe have control of, then that's a sign that maybe you should talk to somebody, or maybe you should ask your parents about what they think about getting some help.
What is some advice that you would have for a middle schooler and a high schooler, going with and in the middle of dealing with just some various mental health issues, or B, in order to kind of set themselves up to not go through that as much as possible?
Yeah.
What are some thoughts, what are some actual practical things that they can go ahead and try to implement in their life, whether very practically in the moment or in their spiritual and prayer life?
That's good.
Well, the overall the best way to be addressing it is in a proactive response. Are you in community? What is that? Is that a sports team? Is that extracurricular activities? Is that 4-H FFA? Is that a student government? Is that math club? Is that Key Club? What is that you can proactively be connected with? Is it youth group? Are you attending youth group regularly? Are you attending youth nights? Are you connecting with your youth pastor regularly? They want to connect with you. If you're not connected with them, guys, make sure you're connecting with your youth pastors. They want to take you for coffee. They want to talk to you about how life is. They really do care. And proactively be aware of what's happening. Also, know your family history. If family's got stuff, then we have a genetic piece. If it's addictions or any other mental illness, it's going to be potentially attacking you at some time in your life. Be aware of what that is and be proactive. You're getting to the age where you can start to self-advocate. We know you middle schoolers and high schoolers are really good communicators already. I work with so many of you, and your vocabularies really shock me sometimes because you're so aware of so much of how to communicate and self-advocate. And that's what you need to do. Ask for help. Reach out for help. Communicate with those people around you that you trust. And trust through the process that you're going to continue to grow through the healing and the thriving through the suffering or the experience that you're experiencing.
Yeah, that's so good. And like I can't help but just think like one of my favorite verses is John 10:10, right? It says like the thief's purpose is to steal and to kill and to destroy. So I'm just reminded of that every day. All right, if there's an enemy that's trying to steal, kill, and destroy my life and my purpose. Like if that verse ended there, it would be very discouraging. But then Jesus says, you know, like, but Jesus.
That's tough.
Right. That's tough. Let's leave it at that. But Jesus doesn't leave us there, and he says, no, but my purpose is to give you a rich and satisfying life. Yeah. So like just focusing on that second part, but realizing that there is an enemy out there, right? So it's like. I love how you hit on that, just being proactive.
Just piggybacking on that a little bit, just triggered in my mind. Get your friends to pray for you.
Yes.
Pray over this. Yeah. Get those around you to pray. Be bold in your own prayers over this healing progression and whatever's happening, and know that there's an answer to that prayer.
That's so good.
Absolutely.
Also, it's okay to struggle with anxiety or depression or any of that because we live in a fallen world and the devil is constantly trying to attack us. And so it's okay, but the thing is you can't just sit there and you can't just sit there and struggle because that's when it becomes not okay.
And so don't ever let this cause shame or discouragement. You're not a bad Christian. Like Cassidy said, we live in a fallen world and the enemy is going to use whatever he possibly can to try to get us.
That's right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your transparency, for your willingness to be open and have this conversation. I think that it kept coming up, having a community and a small group of people you can be honest with and have this type of conversation with on like a daily basis is so helpful.
Yeah.
And because I believe that if we try to do this alone, we're gonna fail.
Definitely.
If we try to do this by ourselves, it's not going to work out. So I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for having this conversation, guys. I hope this encouraged you, but don't let this conversation end here. Don't go home and just okay, that was cool, but hey, talk to your youth pastor, talk to your friends at church, because this is something that I think is a process. It's a journey, as well as anything else. So thank you guys. I'm going to give it to the youth pastors.